everyone, it's CandyEvie here. So with Pokemon Go being released and with Pokemon Sun and Moon due to be released later on this year, there really is a lot of excitement for the new games. But Pokemon isn't just about the main series games. From Hey You Pikachu to Mystery Dungeon, there's an ever-expanding amount of spin-off titles to look at. But even with Pokemon's popularity, there are some games that never even got a worldwide release, so we never even got to play them. And that's exactly what today's video is going to be about. Today, I'm going to be doing a countdown of the top 10 Pokemon games that never got released. I'm going to be judging these games based on how much they interest me, so it'll be a pretty opinion-based list. But let's take a look. At number 10, we've got Pokemon games for the Sega Pico and the Advanced Pico-Bina. Here are a couple of consoles that I'd never even heard of before. The Sega Pico was released in 1993, while its successor, the Advanced Pico-Bina, was released only in Japan in 2005. These consoles are targeted toward very small children, with the games you can play on them being educational games. There were Pokemon games of this nature released for both of the Pico consoles, but they never saw a localized release, despite the fact that the original Sega Pico was available in the US. The Pokemon games released for these consoles would teach the player about reading and numbers. These games were released from Generation 3 to Generation 5. The closest game that has been released outside of Japan of this nature that I can even think of would be Typing Adventure. These games aren't really anything huge to players of my age, but the amount of small children that could have been introduced to Pokemon had these games been localized is pretty thought-provoking. Number 9 is The Band of Thieves and 1000 Pokemon. Okay, so forgive me for speaking of a game that I don't really understand too well, but it still interested me, so that's why it's on the list. This game was released for a limited time on the Japanese eShop back in 2014. It seems to be related to the movie Diaz and the Cocoon of Destruction, with the stages telling the stories of some of the movie's characters. I honestly don't understand the gameplay mechanics too well, but there appear to be different types of challenges that you have to complete in order to advance. This game has Street Pass capabilities too, so if you encounter another player via Street Pass, then you can receive Pokemon to help you in your quest. The style of this game is really cute, but I still don't really get it. Number 8 is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Gold Rescue Team. I'm sure you've heard about Red and Blue Rescue Team, but what about Gold Rescue Team? Gold Rescue Team isn't in fact an actual game, but more of a demo. It was released only in South Korea as a PC version online. There isn't really a lot of information about Gold Rescue Team because the downloadable demo has been lost to time. But I'm guessing we probably weren't missing out on much because it was, well, a demo. So I wouldn't even be surprised if the game ended after the first mission in Tiny Woods. I guess you can dream though. Number 7 is Detective Pikachu. Being the most recent game on this list, Detective Pikachu is a strange one. This game was teased nearly 3 years ago, but we didn't hear anything about it for another 2 years. It was then announced out of the blue in January of this year, and was released on the Japanese eShop soon after. It's a mystery-solving game where you take on the role of Tim Goodman and solve mysteries with the help of a Pikachu detective. It looks pretty cool, but it's been nearly 6 months since the game's Japanese release, and we haven't heard anything about any other releases elsewhere. The last shimmering bit of hope that we have for an English release of this game would be the fact that it's been announced that production for a live-action Detective Pikachu movie will start in 2017. This is likely as a result of the success of Pokemon Go, so if Detective Pikachu ever sees an English release, then we probably have Pokemon Go to thank for it. Number 6 is Pokemon card game How to Play Diaz. I have been into the trading card game more recently, but I'd never even heard of this game before I started doing research for this video. Pokemon card game How to Play Diaz is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a DS game that shows you how to play the trading card game. Except it's in Japanese, so I can't understand a word of it. The game comes with a playing mat, counters, a coin, and the entire black and white beginning set. I'm guessing that this game was never released simply because there probably wasn't a lot of demand for it. It is a pretty obscure title after all. The character designs are pretty nice, and remind me a little bit of the artwork from Typing Adventure in the Ranger series. But if I want to learn how to play the trading card game, I guess I'm gonna have to look elsewhere. At number 5, we have Pokemon Picross for Game Boy Color. In the spring of 1999, a puzzle game named Pokemon Picross for Game Boy Color was revealed. There was tons of promotional artwork for the game, as well as various development screenshots. But this game went completely unreleased. And I'm not just talking about no releases outside of Japan. It just straight up went unreleased. 4 Pokemon themed puzzles were featured in the SNES game, Picross NP Volume 1, but this game wasn't specifically Pokemon themed. And as well as that, this game was only ever released in Japan too, on the Nintendo Power Service, which was discontinued over 9 years ago. But all hope isn't lost for Pokemon Picross. Even though Pokemon Picross for Game Boy Color went completely unreleased, amazingly, over 16 years later, we randomly received Pokemon Picross as a free downloadable 3DS title by the same company that was developing the Game Boy Color title, being Jupiter Corporation. Number 4 is Pokemon Green. This is probably the most well-known unreleased game ever, and for good reason, seeing as it's the only main series game not to see a worldwide release. Pokemon Red and Green were the first Pokemon games, but there was a lot to improve on. So, in Japan, Pokemon Blue was released, with fixes to some of the glitches in the original Red and Green, and graphical changes like updated sprites. And then the fourth game of Generation 1, Yellow, was released, which was different again to the first three. When it came to the rest of the world, however, we were given Red and Blue as a pair, and then Yellow later on. But what happened to Green? And why was it never released? Well, technically, Pokemon Yellow was the only one of the 4 games that was properly released worldwide. The Pokemon Red and Blue that we know of is really a mixture of Japan's Red, Green, and Blue. Things like the Pokemon encounter data was used from Red and Green, while the new graphics and other updates are courtesy of Pokemon Blue. So, while Pokemon Green was the only Generation 1 title not to be released over here, its status still very much lives on within the games that we did receive. At number 3, we have unreleased games for the Pokemon Mini. The Pokemon Mini is the smallest cartridge-based console ever produced by Nintendo. The games developed for this console are, of course, as you guessed it, Pokemon games. In total, there were 10 different cartridges that were made for this console, but only 4 of them ever made it outside of Japan. These would be Pokemon Party Mini, Zany Cards, Pinball Mini, and Puzzle Collection. But we never even got to see Pokemon Tetris, Puzzle Collection Volume 2, Race Mini, Pichu Bros Mini, Togepi's Great Adventure, or Pokemon Breeder Mini. None of these games really needed to be released worldwide, but there's just something so charming about these types of games to me. They really remind me of the style of the Poke Walker released a lot later, but all games combined, the Pokemon Mini probably had a lot more to offer than the Poke Walker did. I would try it myself, but both the console and the cartridges are expensive, and I don't have that much cash to burn. Number 2 is the Pikachu DS Tech Demo. The Pikachu DS Tech Demo was a collection of mini-games shown at 2004's E3 event. It was intended to show off the capabilities of the new console, the DS. The mini-games are similar in nature to the game Hey You Pikachu. Examples of mini-games that could be played would be Guitar, which is pretty self-explanatory, drawing pictures for Pikachu to judge, and Pull, which is where you pull at Pikachu's cheeks. These minigames never saw the light of day because they were only ever intended to show off the capabilities of the Nintendo DS's hardware, but it confuses me why so much work was put into creating a game that was only ever used to show off the system's capabilities, and not to actually be played. It's a shame, but it does give you a little bit of an idea as to what a Hey You Pikachu DS game would have been like. But hey, what about Hey You Pikachu for 3DS? It could happen. And number 1 is DS Fishing Rally. Back in 2005, for a few months there was this Pokemon fishing game that could be downloaded at Pokemon Centers and Pokemon Festa. It was kinda like those demos that you could download of other games through this method, except this was the only way to even access this game at all. If you shut off your DS, then the game would disappear. And it had a 12-hour time limit. There go my dreams for keeping this game for 11 years just so that I'd be able to play it. But anyway, this game is as simple as it sounds. You cast out your fishing rod and fish for Pokemon. There's actually a pretty large selection of Pokemon for you to catch. The graphics are very impressive for a game that in the grand scheme of things wasn't really all that significant. Bear in mind that this game was available during Generation 3, but they managed to implement 3D models for every Pokemon featured. Bear in mind that Pokemon sprites were only switched out for 3D models 3 generations later on a different console. And in all honesty, I like the models used in this game a lot better. They just seem to have a lot more personality. Just look at this Carvana! This game really is just such a hidden gem, and it's my personal favourite out of all of the games I've seen. Well, those were my top 10 unreleased Pokemon games. There are actually quite a few more interesting ones that I didn't cover, so maybe I'll make another video on it depending on how well this one's received. If you want to see another video on unreleased Pokemon games, then be sure to leave a like on this video so that I can get a good measure of how many people actually want one. But that's just about it for today's video. If you want to learn something new, then you should check out this video covering facts about Trainer Red. Or click this video to see 10 Pokemon card Easter eggs. But for now, that's over now from me, and I'll see you next time. Bye!